you know, people have this image of Muhammad as, the braggadocio, the arrogance, the confidence. And they probably, many people who don't know him well or haven't studied his life well, probably think that winning for the sake of winning was more important to him than it really was. I think he loved to win. I love to win. I don't care if I'm playing cards or something else. I love to win. I'm competitive. And so obviously was Muhammad, and he was so gifted. But he wanted to win so that he had a platform to do more important things, where you're on a plane for 14 hours or something, and you have long, long, long talks. And Muhammad would have fun and be silly, but he always came back to purpose. He always wanted me, even as a very young girl, to be thinking about what my purpose was, to be thinking about what my identity was. I love that Muhammad knew and demonstrated again and again that the body is nothing compared to the mind. You know, George Foreman was as formidable an opponent as he could face, but he beat him mentally. He had nicknames for so many of his entourage. And so I kind of loved it, but I didn't really think about what it meant. Um, and as I said, he knew people, he could see through you, he knew what you needed to hear. And in wanting to protect the innocence in me, um, I think he was just keenly aware of what a chaotic world I was walking through, and wanted me to be aware. So I think it was a joke, but I think it was also a bit of a warning. People were there for different reasons. I think that anyone who was with Muhammad was not, I would not describe anybody who was with Muhammad as a leech. I would think that Muhammad was magic. And to bask in the glow of Muhammad Ali was the most incredible feeling in the world. And Muhammad had probably his greatest gift was noticing everyone, seeing them, listening to them, making them feel important, respected, loved, special, unique, believed in.
All right, folks, Sifu Slim here at theagingathlete.com and sifuslim.com, and I'm really excited to bring you a story that's very near and dear to me. Starting out when I was 6 years old, I became a Muhammad Ali fan when he just transitioned from Cassius Clay to his new Muslim name, Muhammad Ali. And I want to play you folks a video of him doing something very special. But first, I want you folks to give us a like, thumbs up if you would, and consider subscribing down below. And here we go.
The stage is set for me to be ranked as the greatest of all time. You know what? They have no excuses after this. I got them cornered. I got the world cornered. Ain't no excuses. This is the hardest hitter since Marciano. This man is greater than Joe Louis. I've been reading what you're saying. Just because a black Muslim beat him, don't make him nothing now. He should have waited 3 more years. Maybe in 3 more years, I may have slowed down a little. But don't you believe that brainwash stuff. You've been watching me train, you watch me dance, and it looked better than I did 10 years ago. Right. Don't talk that stuff about my legs ago. Right. I want to train 20 rounds today. They won't let me. That's right. They said I can't. I was 240 at one time. They say spat. Look at me now. Don't tell me that ain't a perfect specimen of a man.
There we go. So I'm going to bring in Kelly Reilly Baldwin from south of San Diego in Baja, California. Welcome aboard, Kelly.
Thank you, Sifu. I'm excited to be with you to talk about one of my favorite topics.
Tell me if you remember this clip that I just played and where you think that was from.
I'm so sorry, but I couldn't hear it very well. I heard a little bit about, I heard Muhammad say he's like the best specimen of a man. Is that right? Did I hear
That's
that?
correct. That's
I
correct.
heard that, but I really couldn't hear it very well. I'm sorry.
No problem. I wanted to pull in a clip since you were part of Ali's entourage in his second career. I wanted to bring in a clip from Ali and his entourage over in Zaire at the Rumble in the Jungle when
Mm,
he's training. So tell me
love it.
what you know about the pre-fight, post-fight, the Rumble in the Jungle, if you'd be so kind.
So the Rumble in the Jungle was a little bit before my time. I didn't meet Muhammad until 1978.
Gotcha. And was there still rumbling going on about the rumbling in the Rumble in the Jungle?
I think there will always be rumbling going on about the Rumble in the Jungle, won't there?
I think so. What I wrote down in my notes, Kelly, is my opinion, his two biggest fights were against people who threw bombs. Sonny Liston, number one fight in his early career, his first career, and then George Foreman in his second career in the Rumble
Mm,
in the Jungle. So I count those as the most pivotal fights, and for him, and also for the boxing audience. You could say in the 20th century, you've got Joe Louis and Max Schmeling leading up to World War II. And then you've got these two Ali fights that were really big deals in the international scene. What do you think about that, Kelly?
they sure were. And I know now, we're about to have the 50th anniversary of the Thrilla in Manila. And it's always just so exciting to me that these milestones are celebrated to this day. So Rumble in the Jungle, that wasn't that long ago when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of that. And it's just, I'm always blown away by Muhammad's staying power. I think it's absolutely justified. But the fact that after decades, these fights are so just prevalent and just hold such a powerful place in history. No matter what's come after them, they don't seem to fade away. So I agree 100%.
One more clip I'm going to play. This is his entourage in the tunnel before
Okay,
the
I'm going to try
Rumble
to
in the
listen.
Jungle.
Okay.
And this is, of course, the Foreman fight. And his entourage is huge by this time, 1974. All these people over in Zaire. There's a music concert. There's tens of thousands people in the street, all celebrating, leading up to this thing with the music in the air. It's hot and humid. The press has
Mhm.
been there for weeks and months. And here's Ali turning back, a realist, definitely a dreamer, but also a realist. And he looks back and his entourage they're all gloomy, and so
Mhm.
they're worried about him losing his jaw, his eye, and his life. That's kind of
Mm.
what's going on here.
You all looking so damn scared. Act like you're going to a funeral. I'm the one fighting. George Foreman, George Foreman. You've been believing all that stuff you've been reading about how hard he hits. George Foreman knocked down Joe Frazier. He destroyed the kid. You my friend, and the public is expecting you. The hell with George Foreman. When you get out here, if you're afraid, just smile. Just act like you're happy. I'm not gonna win the fight if I went out thinking like you. Damn George Foreman.
So he says, "Damn George Foreman, a man with
Mm.
a Muslim faith, with Christian parents. Damn George Foreman." I can sense that he feels the need to shift the energy of the whole evening. And he's a magician with doing stuff
Yes.
like this. Higher power, inner power, the fans, and everything. I mean, the most famous man in the world at this time, perhaps. And look at what he's doing before the fight. Over to Kelly for her thoughts.
Yeah, Sifu. That reminds me. As I said, I wasn't there for that fight, but that does remind me of some of the fights that I was there for. I think about much later in Muhammad's career, and when some of his entourage really didn't want him to continue fighting, and how he had to really take control of the mood and the energy that he allowed around him, and that's what that scene brings to mind for me. I think also it also makes me think about you know, people have this image of Muhammad as, the braggadocio, the arrogance, the confidence. And they probably, many people who don't know him well or haven't studied his life well, probably think that winning for the sake of winning was more important to him than it really was. I think he loved to win. I love to win. I don't care if I'm playing cards or something else. I love to win. I'm competitive. And so obviously was Muhammad, and he was so gifted. But he wanted to win so that he had a platform to do more important things. And I think, the telling everyone in the entourage, like, why are you guys looking so sad? Or so I can't remember the word that he used, but looking like you're going to a funeral. I think in part is, we're going to shake off that energy. That's not going to help me win, and I want to win. But more importantly, this is a fight. This is a boxing match. And and I care about things that are so much more important. I think Muhammad always had that perspective. He just couldn't always let it show.
Now, as a young person, now they call them young ladies. Back in our day, they called you a young girl when you first were in there in that picture. I think, were you 14? Is that correct? In that
I was
picture?
13 when I met Muhammad, but I began traveling with the entourage at 14.
And so when did you first realize the idea that you just put forward about winning to have a platform and doing well to have a platform?
I'd say pretty early on. Um, I think about some of the opportunities that we had to have long talks, like on a transatlantic or a trans-Pacific rather flight, where you're on a plane for 14 hours or something, and you have long, long, long talks. And Muhammad would have fun and be silly, but he always came back to purpose. He always wanted me, even as a very young girl, to be thinking about what my purpose was, to be thinking about what my identity was. So I think I knew pretty early on, after just a few in-depth conversations, that Muhammad was way deeper, um, cared about things much weightier than sport.
Could you say on those conversations there was a little bit of ministering going on and coaching and uncling going on between Muhammad and you on those flights and long conversations?
That's entirely what it was. Mentoring. I always felt a very paternal nature from him. Um, Gene Kilroy, Muhammad's business manager, um, said, he said, I was an innocent dove, and that Muhammad was very drawn to that innocence and protecting that innocence. And I think it's because Muhammad's innocence was taken from him so young, just that he was made into this product very young. And I always felt like he really cared about who I became and who I thought myself to be. And so it was very intentional ministering, very mentoring. And you say ministering, often explicitly spiritual, but always implicitly spiritual.
Very well put, Kelly. I have one more clip to finish up the Rumble in the Jungle. This is George Foreman, who became a man who loved Ali. They had a really strong bond. And it didn't take too many years after Zaire, Kinshasa Zaire, Ali picked up the phone call and called up George, and they got, started the phone relationship, and then they got together in person. They were from different religions, but they drew this love bond, shared experience, both Olympic gold medalists and both African Americans dealing with what they had to deal with. Foreman, 8 years younger, something like that. And so here's Foreman reflecting years later. This clip might be from the early 2000s, and this is over the fight scene. So here we go.
The fight with Muhammad Ali was spectacular. I intended to win the easiest fight of my career. I get into the ring with the guy, beat him up basically for about 5 or 6 rounds. I thought it was easy. Then about the sixth round, he whispered in my ear, "That's all you got, George?" And that was about all I had. It turned into a nightmare then.
I stayed on the ropes. I didn't dance for a reason. I wanted to make him lose all his power. I kept telling him he had no punch. He couldn't hit. He's swinging like a sissy. He's missing. Let me see your box. Staying on the ropes is a beautiful thing with a heavyweight when you make him shoot his best shots and you know he's not hitting you. I would have gave George Foreman 2 rounds of steady punching because after that he was mine.
I realized all those punches were basically a waste. I'm going to tell you right now, I was the most tired I've ever been in my life. I don't understand. That fight was going to go on for another 5 rounds or so. I don't know if I would have made it anyway.
Over to Kelly. I heard you chuckling. So what do you think about Foreman's statement?
Oh, Sifu, I think it I love that Muhammad knew and demonstrated again and again that the body is nothing compared to the mind. You know, George Foreman was as formidable an opponent as he could face, but he beat him mentally. So he knew people so well. He paid attention to people and what would be an effective strategy in the ring or uh, just in life and motivating someone, inspiring someone was different based on what he saw in that person. And he knew if George could give him his best punches and he could act as if it was nothing, act as if it didn't impact him at all, that would just strip away his confidence. So, yeah, Muhammad was brilliant.
Now over to the Kelly Reilly Baldwin story. I have something that you wrote here I'd like to read. It says, Muhammad rarely called me Kelly. Soon after we met, he took to calling me Little Trouble, then plain Trouble. While I always considered what I always considered a loving nickname betrayed his true concerns. Muhammad knew what menaces awaited guileless young girls behind fame's glittery curtain. Yet no matter how hard he tried, trouble still found me. Oh my gosh, very well written. Tell us a little bit about that part. And is that in your book? Is that an opening of your book or on the cover of your book?
I have that in the preface of my book. That's where I pulled that piece from. And yeah, when he first started calling me Trouble, it was my mom and I, and it was Trouble 1 and Trouble 2. Mom was Trouble 1 and I was Trouble 2. And when he first started calling us that, it kind of felt a little bit like a badge of honor. It felt like being welcomed in,
Yeah.
uh, because he had nicknames for so many of his entourage. And so I kind of loved it, but I didn't really think about what it meant. And as I said, he knew people, he could see through you, he knew what you needed to hear. And in wanting to protect the innocence in me, I think he was just keenly aware of what a chaotic world I was walking through and wanted me to be aware. So I think it was a joke, but I think it was also a bit of a warning.
Yeah. He had a brother, no sisters, but he had 4 wives, I think, along the way, and multitudes
A
of
bunch of
girlfriends.
daughters.
Bunch of daughters. There you go. Yeah. How many? Four daughters, something like that. And could you tell us how you first connected with Ali? If you got out there via your mom, if you lived nearby, how did that happen?
I was living in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was doing some local modeling in Cleveland. And my dad had a business meeting. My stepdad had a business meeting in New York. And we talked to my agent, and they set up some appointments in the city for me to try to see if perhaps I could, get some work in a larger market. And we were staying at the Plaza Hotel in New York. And when I came back from my go-sees, my modeling agent visits, I got out of the taxi and left my portfolio on the floor of the backseat of the taxi. And I was devastated
With your
because
address on it?
No, with my initials on it, but nothing that would help anybody find me. Just my initials, kind of embossed on the leather case, gold letters on the leather case. But it was everything of value to me at the time in somebody who was trying to grow as a model or break into modeling career. And so I walked into the lobby and I was devastated and crying and panicking. And I told, my mom, what are we going to do? And the next thing we know, Gene Kilroy, Muhammad's business manager, was at our side. And he said, are you ladies okay? And my mom kind of played it off or downplayed, I guess, downplayed my crisis. And I was so annoyed that she was downplaying it. And Jean said something to the effect of, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. Come meet the champ. And I was like, whatever, mister. I don't, I lost my portfolio. And then I looked across the lobby and there was Muhammad. And Muhammad, this is 1978. Muhammad was everywhere. Um, Television commercials and on the radio and magazine covers, and I think he was at that time considered the most famous man in the world. And I saw him and I was like, oh my gosh, when he said the champ, that's what he meant. And he brought us over and introduced us, and that was kind of the beginning there.
Wow, that's fascinating. And this was from Cleveland to New York. Is that where you were? Did you
Yeah,
drive?
we just happened to be staying at the same hotel
Did you
in New York.
drive or fly to New York from Cleveland?
I think we flew, but I really don't remember that part. I remember the important parts. I wrote those in my diary.
That's good. Did you keep a diary for a long time?
I still have my diaries.
Wow,
That's
that's very helpful to a writer, isn't it?
it is incredibly helpful. I have diaries, letters, photos, poetry journals, all kinds of things that I have drawn on very heavily.
Now you have to live long enough to write your 12 books.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a picture of you, Kelly. I don't know the first gentleman in a brown leather jacket. The other person with a yellow shirt looks like Wilfred Benitez, and then you. Is that correct?
Yes, that I think I know what you're looking at. It's probably Mike Weaver, who was a WBA heavyweight champion in 1980, and Wilfred Benitez was the youngest world champion ever. I think when he became welterweight champion, no one had ever become champion younger than Wilfred.
Yeah, Mike Weaver is a man they called Hercules or something like that, and then with
That's
his
right.
leather jacket on, and his look, you can't tell how buff this guy is. He looks like just another Motown musician in this picture. But now that you mention Weaver, I can see his face. It's just he's so young. It looks to me like he's so young in this picture that
He
it's
needed a haircut in that picture, if I'm thinking of the right picture. Uh, and yeah, Ken Norton had given him that nickname. He sparred with Kenny for years, and he gave him that nickname. And Michael never liked that nickname. He always said, Hercules is a myth, but I'm the real thing. So,
well, there were two Hercules at that time. Norton was one of them, and both
uh,
really hard workers. Norton, I would say, because Ali wasn't, he played a little bit of football until he was, I don't know, 14 or 15. I think he said freshman year of high school he played football, and but he didn't. If you can compare him to Norton and some other athletes who played multiple sports and were lettermen in like three or four sports, and then Norton also did the Marine Corps. Ali was more of a boxing, all the workouts related to that. I don't know what his dancing skills were. He looked like he was a good horse rider in the pictures and the video clips that you see. Good runner
mm,
and good singer. But I don't know
yes.
much about his. I know he got his bike stolen, which is how he got into boxing. So he probably did some cycling along the way. But do you know anything else about Ali's other athletic abilities? Wood chopping, incredible at that.
If you call that athletic, yeah. Nothing really comes to mind. He did have his horses up at his camp in Deer Lake, and he loved to ride his horses. And uh, certainly it's hilly there, and he would do lots of running to train. And he has this this bell outside his cabin, and he would get up at like 4:30 in the morning and pull the string, and the bell would wake up his sparring partners, and they would all go running through the hills together. And I know that. But in terms of other sports, I really don't remember ever hearing anything about that. I think, he started boxing so young,
Yeah.
and his talent was discovered right away, that I imagine, but it's really just imagining, that, he specialized,
Yeah.
at a very early age.
Similar to Mike Tyson. He got into boxing relatively young, and he
Mhm.
said, and Mike Tyson's criticism of boxing at that elite level when he was 19, he says,
Mm.
but this is very boring, the training I do. It's very similar every day, and I
You
don't have
sound
much
like
of a
him.
life. Yeah, I used to imitate all these guys, and that was kind of my thing, and for
I
my
could
first
totally hear Mike
30
there.
years.
I
But
could totally hear it.
I am the greatest. I am number one. I will whoop Joe Frazier in the fifth round. You be watching. So, and I've never met Ali, but I've always been drawn to him. And I would say that my fighting style, when I was training boxers in Sacramento, was very
Hmm.
much like Ali, just in a thinner body, more like a Thomas Hearns, a little bit bigger than Thomas Hearns, but
Okay.
similar body. And my cousin, who's built like more like Tyson, who's this swarmer with all this muscle and power. And I said, and he was trying to get me into, the heavy weights and that type of thing. And I used to do the heavy weights in high school, a little bit in college, and it made me clunky. And Ali, from what
Mm.
I can tell, figured that out along the way too. He wanted to be more of the jab whip and keep everything loose. Larry Holmes got into weights a little bit, and I don't know if that was positive for him or what, but he did really well, Larry Holmes. But Ali was more that snap and move guy, and that's what I would be. The big difference is I couldn't take a punch like Ali could.
Yeah, you got to know your strengths, right? Maximize your strengths, minimize your weaknesses.
Did you ever do any boxing training, Kelly?
Well, once at Deer Lake, I was in the gym and just playing around with the speed bag, and no one else was in the gym except my mom, my friend Christine, and me. And Muhammad walked in and kind of caught me hitting the speed bag while trying to hit it, and came over and said, "No, no, 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 no. Let me show you how this is done," and gave me a little lesson. That's the extent of my boxing experience. Uh,
What were you doing for fitness between like age 14 and 24?
oh, I was a cheerleader, a swimmer, a tennis player, a skier. Nothing. I wasn't, into serious competitive team sports, but I was real, real active. Came from
Wow.
a family that did a lot, sailing and a number of things.
And I'm looking at a picture of you. It looks like a cabin behind you and Muhammad. You're looking down at him. You've got perhaps a tan or a white purse on. It's a black and white, and he's looking up at you. Where's this
Mm.
picture from?
I believe that is in the kitchen at his training camp. There's a long table there, and his cook, Lana Shabazz, would cook meals, and everybody who was staying at camp would come eat meals together. And Muhammad just spent a lot of time hanging out in there. Um, and I'm pretty sure that
That
must be
sounds
what
right.
you're looking at.
What
Yeah.
what year approximately are we looking at?
It was definitely between 78 and 80. Um, because after he stopped fighting, he stopped training at Deer Lake. So
Okay.
within that time frame, probably 79, if I had to guess.
Love is a heavy weight. What Muhammad Ali taught me about holding on and letting go, working title for your forthcoming book.
Yeah.
Met Ali at 13 and spent the next 5 years in his midst, sometimes called the debutante of the Ali entourage. Do you want to share any more stories that come to mind about that period in your life?
Sure. Yeah, the memoir kind of chronicles the wonder and the chaos of coming of age amidst Muhammad's circle, and how his guidance transformed me from a naive and needy girl into a confident and capable woman. And I really do credit him for so much of that. Um, I started out without much of a role. I don't know, Gene Kilroy always says that the keeper of the stars brought us together, and that God knows exactly what souls to need one another. And so I kind of believe that, and began my place in Muhammad's circle without really any role, but he made me feel like family. And then I don't know if you know much about Harold Smith and Muhammad Ali sports, but when Harold came along and partnered with Muhammad and Muhammad Ali sports, he hired me to be an Ali Angel. And at that time, I took on an official role. So an Ali Angel was like a brand ambassador of the 1970s and 80s, if there had been such a thing. But in a sense, it was a glorified ring card girl. We did some other promotional things. We spoke to the media and hosted parties and so forth. But I was the baby of that group. And yeah, spent 4 or 5, almost 5 years traveling around with them all the time until I went off to college. And when I went off to college, well, I'm actually not going to share that part because I don't want to, I want to get people excited about my book, but I don't want to tell you
I'll
the
save that for the
whole
book.
story. So yeah.
Um, I'm going to mention a couple of the people that we talked about, and maybe you'll have some recollections of
Yeah.
any interactions or phone conversations. So Herbert Muhammad, in charge of a lot of the contracts and the deals and the money. Somebody told me 5 months ago, and this person wasn't around Ali as you were and as many people in the entourage were, but he said the Ali's entourage is known as being too big and too full of leeches. That's what he said. And I don't know if he was referring to the first part of Ali's career or the second part, or what that was all about. Tell me if that statement is inaccurate, or what your thoughts are on that.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes.
Who said that? Or you say you don't?
I have someone who said that. I'd rather not put
Okay,
his
that's
name
fine. That's
out
fine.
there.
That's fine.
But I don't think he's the only
I get it.
person who said that. You probably
Sure.
heard that comment before.
Sure. The entourage was big. The entourage was, I don't know if you've ever heard anyone refer to it as the disciples and the apostles.
Wow.
Have you heard that?
No, I have not heard that.
So that's, there were the disciples and there were the apostles. There were the small group of people that were with Muhammad for years and years and years, decades, many of them, that were incredibly close to Muhammad, and those would obviously be the apostles. And then there were the disciples, and Muhammad loved them and welcomed them in. I would say loved us and welcomed us in. But people were there for different reasons. I think that anyone who was with Muhammad was not, I would not describe anybody who was with Muhammad as a leech. I would think that Muhammad was magic. And to bask in the glow of Muhammad Ali was the most incredible feeling in the world. And Muhammad had probably his greatest gift was noticing everyone, seeing them, listening to them, making them feel important, respected, loved, special, unique, believed in. So anybody who had the chance to be close to Muhammad, I feel like you would have done it. So, and I don't consider that to be a leech.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, different people had more to contribute. Um, I had very little to contribute. And I don't consider myself a member of the entourage, but for a period of 4 or 5 years, was very close and very much a part of the inner circle, very much a part of what I think everybody there would have called a family. Um, but uh, I think it's more, I think, like I think there's a TV show or some kind of series about the entourage. And I think there are a lot of people who attract selfish people, greedy people, people who are in it for themselves. I feel like there's something so extraordinary about Muhammad that doesn't apply. I think there were a few people, I don't know if we should say, but so Bundini, for instance. Bundini, who, people call Muhammad's hype man, Bundini, he always had an angle. There was something in it for him. And I have some specific stories if you want to get into them. But even with that, even with always having an angle, he sincerely loved Muhammad with all his heart and cared about Muhammad. And Muhammad saw Bundini for who he was and loved him right back despite it. So yeah, that is my response to that, Sifu.
So, can I hit one more side of the touchier subjects, and then we'll move on to some of the other ones?
We can
Um,
try.
I mentioned Herbert Muhammad, son of Elijah Muhammad.
Yeah.
Um, Here's what you can easily find on the internet. After Malcolm X was killed, Ali lived in fear of being taken out by the hitmen of the FOI, the Fruit of Islam, the security wing of the NOI, the Nation of Islam. He said that. Ali has said that, and it's been quoted in books. And it was a dicey time. You had two Kennedys assassinated, and you had Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and other people. Medgar Evers was killed, but there were some other people in the civil rights movement who were killed, and then other people. It was just a time of lots of assassinations in the 1960s and 70s. So over to you if you have any comments on Herbert Muhammad and some of the deals that Muhammad Ali got out of a $5 million purse. A significant amount of that went to Herbert Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, which was, they were partially being bankrolled in a certain way by Ali for a period of time, according to many sources.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know Herbert well. He was around at times. He traveled at times. I think a lot of people think of him as business manager, but I think Gene was very much more Muhammad's business manager, both prior to Herbert coming on board when Muhammad joined the Nation of Islam, but also in terms of what he did, what he was responsible for. I always saw Herbert as more of he did negotiate contracts. He did negotiate some of Muhammad's largest purses, but I saw him as more of an advisor as to the faith and how the things that Muhammad was doing publicly reflected on the Nation of Islam. Is this something, basically, is this cool? Is this cool for me to do? That he was that kind of advisor. I don't think that he was as capable of a business mind as Gene. He didn't have the background to do that. He was a faith primarily. And yeah, I can't speak to how much money he took or what he was what he should have been entitled to as a manager. But I will say that I think his responsibilities were less of a business manager.
Did you ever hear Muhammad teed off at Herbert Muhammad?
No, I can only think of two times that I saw Muhammad mad. One was at Bundini, and one was at a reporter, and he was defending Harold Smith uh, when he was very mad. And Bundini had done two things. This was on our trip to Australia. Bundini, number one, had arranged a meeting for Muhammad and Veronica, his wife at the time, with a jeweler that was coming from New Zealand to where we were in Australia. And my mom actually overheard Bundini talking to um, I think it was Bob Campbell, somebody who worked for Muhammad Ali Sports, but I'm not certain it was Bob. But my mom overheard Bundini talking about how he was going to get a kickback on any sales that Muhammad would make. I mean, any purchases that Muhammad would make from this jeweler. And my mom let Muhammad know, and Muhammad was ticked off. And then um, that's a whole nother story about how he handled that. But then after the meeting with the jeweler happened, Bundini also went on Australian TV drunk and
No.
gave an interview that was just a bad reflection. You know, it was giving an interview as a kind of a representative of Muhammad Ali. And so when we got back to it was the Boulevard Hotel in Sydney, Australia, and we got back to the hotel, Muhammad told Bundini off in the hallway of the hotel, and Bundini actually cried. And Muhammad said, "I'm going to send you back to Harlem." And Bundini cried real tears in the hallway of that hotel, and we were all there to witness it. So I saw him mad.
Bundini had been in Sugar Ray Robinson's corner,
He had,
motivator.
yes, earlier.
That was in the 50s, correct?
I would only be able to guess. I was born in 1964 or so, and I haven't studied up on anything. I just know what I know from being there.
50s to early 60s, maybe, or late 40s to early 60s. He had a long career. Heck of an athlete, incredible dancer, hardworking trainer, smiling guy, friendly guy. And Bundini was in his corner motivating him. And that's in the film with Will Smith.
Okay.
The famous actor. What's the famous actor's name who plays Bundini? And he says, "I was in Sugar Ray Leonard's corner, and I made him great. And I can
Sugar Ray Robinson.
Sugar Ray Robinson's corner, and I can make you great, Muhammad." And then Ali took him under his wing, and that was a nice way to put a synopsis of the beginning of that relationship. Maybe it happened that way. I don't know. I can ask Drew Brown Jr., who I'm supposed to interview in the next few weeks, and ask him. Have you ever met Drew Brown Jr.?
Not that I remember. Not that I remember. Bundini had a girlfriend, I think named Carol, if I remember correctly, who he was with during the time that we were around. He wasn't with Drew's mom. So I don't think I ever met him. And I think he's younger than me, if I'm not mistaken.
Drew Brown Jr.?
I think so, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I would say that he's within 3 years of you. That's what I would guess.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Wali Muhammad is on the list. Ali's longtime massage man. There were two massage people. Here's one of them. Traveled with him, massaged his muscles before and after fights, was a trusted aide. Is that someone that you ran across?
Yeah, they called him Blood or Young Blood. I knew him. I don't think that most people think of him as a masseuse, though. I think that he started sweeping the gym, cleaning the equipment, that kind of stuff early on. And then through the years, as he grew closer to Muhammad, I think in part of because of the bond they shared over their faith, and just his kind of steady personality, he got more and more responsibility and became sort of an assistant trainer and a cornerman. But I might be mistaken, but I think that Luis was his masseuse, but not really Youngblood.
Okay, not Youngblood. Okay.
I don't think so. Somebody might correct me. He had worked with Malcolm X. Blood had worked with Malcolm X, and I think that, you know,
Like
he and
his,
Muhammad had.
what do you call that? Like a gopher type of a person?
I'm not sure what his role was, but I think his closeness to Malcolm X um, kind of contributed to his closeness to Muhammad in that they could have deep conversations about issues of, the faith.
Gene Kilroy, and you saw him even a week or two ago, from what you said in your email, and here it is.
Yeah,
They call him on the internet Ali's business manager and quote unquote fixer, the only man who was with Ali for all of his 61 professional fights. I don't know what they mean by the word fixer. Maybe he took care of problems.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Gene is the entourage member that I'm closest to. Well, first of all, he may be the only living of the apostles, the only living one, but he was always the one that I was closest to. And yes, we talk regularly, probably every week, and see him a few times a year. But I don't like the word fixer. To me, when you say fixer, I think of, I don't know if this is okay to, I know we probably don't want to get political, but I think of like Michael Cohen for Donald Trump, like, oh, Muhammad did terrible things and Gene needs to clean them up. And that was not
Not
the
the case.
situation. No, the term that I would prefer over fixer would be facilitator. A lot of people call Gene the facilitator. Gene had great experience from the time he and Muhammad met at the Olympics in Rome in 1960. So they were together very early on. But Gene went on to work for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he was a vice president at MGM. And so sports and entertainment were his wheelhouse, and he knew everyone and he knew whatever needed to be done. He knew how to get it done. So fixer sounds bad to me. Facilitator, I think, is a
Facilitator, yeah.
much better fit for Gene. But if there were problems, I'm sure he knew how to fix them too. But um, Gene was Gene was also, yeah, really awesome to me. I talk about Muhammad being a protector of my innocence. Gene was too. Um, I remember once when we used to when we would get when we would travel, we would get a block of rooms at the hotels, and we would often prop our doors open and people would just kind of mingle from room to room. And there was once when another Ali Angel and I were laying on a bed in this guy's room. His name was Flip. And Flip was very loud in the way he dressed, like velvet tuxedos and, red hats with feathers, like very, very loud, extravagant in the way he dressed. And Gene walked by and saw us on the bed and called me and said, like, get your ASS out of here. And then he lectured me in the hallway. And he said, if someone sees a fool and a wise man walking down the street, they never say, there goes a fool and a wise man. They say, there go two fools. And by that, he was telling me to be a little more discerning about who I spent time with and whose bed I was seen laying on, fully dressed with a girlfriend, with a woman that I was just chatting with. We were just hanging out in a room with an open door. But he tells me now, he tells me years later that Flip was actually a pimp. I did not know that. The dress was kind of stereotypical of what I would have thought a pimp would wear in those days. But I share that story just to say Gene was always looking out for me, but far more, he was always looking out for Muhammad. And he devoted his life to putting Muhammad first. To this day, uh, I, out of respect for people's privacy, I won't share specifics, but to this day, Gene takes care of people that Muhammad loved in many ways, financially and otherwise.
Yeah.
Gene is still there for
Boy,
Muhammad.
what a blessing to have had Gene, and then also his fourth wife, Lonnie, who UCLA, I think she's got an MBA business background. So some brain power there for a guy
Yes.
like Ali, who's a big lover of people, wants to help everyone out. Elvis did that. Elvis did a lot of similar things to Ali. They're contemporaries. They knew each other. And, Elvis would be leaving like a radio show that he was being interviewed on, and he'd leave and he'd be a little bit high. Like I get a little bit high after these lovely conversations with nice people like you, Kelly. And then you're glowing when you walk out. And then Elvis would go out and he would see somebody on the side of the street and he'd say, "Hey, you want a Cadillac?" And they'd go either that night or the next day and they'd go to the dealership and he'd buy the guy a Cadillac back. Today those
Yeah.
were $50,000 cars, and back then they were the same value, but it was like a $4,000, $5,000 car. And he would do
Yeah.
that. And Ali's done that. Houston McTeer, the sprinter, he bought him a house, and the list is thousands of people Ali did those things for. And
Yes.
I think if you do that with the interest on your money or part of the interest on your money, and you don't disrupt the asset, foundation that's kicking out interest so you can use that to live for the rest of your life, that's fine. But if you're taking your principal and you're no longer going to be in a career that was a $5 million a night career and you're giving that away, you need somebody to slow you down on that. Tell me your thoughts, Kelly, on that.
Well, I think you pointed it out at the beginning of your question that Muhammad was definitely fortunate to have people like Gene and later in life Lonnie, um, who could put the brakes on when he would listen. But I also think he doesn't regret any of his generosity. And later in life, I don't know how much money he had at the end of his life.
50 million is what the internet said when I looked that up yesterday.
Okay. So he did all right, and it wasn't even what he valued. So I think that if given the chance, he would give to anyone he gave to again, regardless of what the outcome was, regardless of whether or not they were appreciative or whether it was a wise financial investment, because he was all about people and all about love. So I think he would
We're,
have regrets, but it doesn't take away the fact that having some people, like you said, Lonnie and Jean, to
prudent and
guide.
sensible people that can think long term. Uh,
Yeah, it's nice to have that balance, but I think he'd have no regrets.
yeah. I the famous video and also pictures of Muhammad going up to the building where the black gentleman was
Mhm.
ready to jump off that building, and Ali comes
Mhm.
out and talks him back in. Do you know where you were when that was going on?
I don't remember.
Howard
It doesn't
Bingham.
surprise me though.
Howard Bingham's on my list. Ali's best friend and personal photographer for decades.
Yeah.
Anything on Howard you'd like to share?
Sure. First of all, I'm so grateful to Howard. Um, people say Muhammad's best friend. I think he was very possibly Muhammad's best friend and certainly one of them. But one of the most amazing things about Muhammad, one of his greatest traits, is how he made so many people feel like they're best friends. I bet you there are a lot of people who would say, I was Muhammad Ali's best friend. But Muhammad certainly loved Howard. They had something definitely special. They were always laughing together. Howard was quiet, soft spoken, but he could still just, and Muhammad was so big, his energy was so big, and Howard was, more subdued, but he could really make Muhammad laugh. Um, I know that after Howard's death, his son inherited all of his photos and has been spending years organizing and cataloging those photos. And I'm so grateful that, they say Muhammad is perhaps the most photographed person in history, or certainly among the most photographed people in history. Um, and the fact that he loved the camera and Howard was often on the other side of that camera probably had something to do with the appeal of that relationship.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, I there's so much content even now, TV shows, movies, a Broadway play that somebody's been working on, 45 years after Muhammad retired, and you still, I didn't know the algorithm is different for everyone, but my feed is full of Ali stuff all the time. And I think a lot of that is thanks to Howard being there to capture everything. So
It's like the Beatles photographer, but the Beatles photographer had 4 people plus their other people that came in to play different instruments and their family members to chronicle for a period of time, but their career didn't last as long as Ali's, amazingly enough, as Beatles. They all had careers after the Beatles,
sure.
but the photographers traveling around, that was I would say that was a popular thing going on from the 1940s through the 1980s. I don't know if Madonna has her own personal photographer, if
Well,
Michael Jackson did. I don't know what's going on in the last 20 years.
I wonder how much cell phones have changed that. I often say and lament about the fact that that I didn't have a cell phone in my pocket back in those days, because I have many nice pictures. I have many blurry, grainy pictures of our time together. I have stacks of scrapbooks, but what would I have to reminisce with if I had had a 2025 version cell phone in my pocket? I can't even imagine. And so I imagine, now it's just so easy for everyone to document what's happening. I take more pictures in a day, perhaps, than I did in a year back then, So I think it's just changed the way we record our lives and save them for posterity.
So, folks, that was the end of part 1 with Kelly Reilly Baldwin, part of the Ali entourage from the late 70s for about 4 or 5 years going into his retirement. And she's working on a book that's soon to be released. Encourage you to pick up a copy of her book. And we will share another conversation coming up. So please give us a thumbs up, like, and consider subscribing, and we'll talk to you in the next video. Aloha.